Thanks for joining me for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum, as always, where all voices matter. You know, I'm always looking for silver linings during this pandemic, and here's one you may not have thought of: the rise of eSports and taking gaming to the next level. Joining us to discuss this fast-growing space is Tom Rogers. He's a former co-founder of CNBC and is currently the executive chairman of Engine Media Holdings. Thanks for joining us today, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. So tell us a little bit about Engine Media Holdings, and I believe you've had a recent merger.
Yes, well, Engine Media is the product of a merger that actually happened over COVID. It is a merger of two public companies with a private Silicon Valley company into a single company focusing on gaming in both the eSports arena and gaming as it relates to traditional sports as well. Public company that trades on the Toronto Exchange and has a number of gaming business units under it.
So is it fair to say that this merger happened as a result of COVID, or was that one of the impetuses of this particular activity?
No, it was well underway before COVID. We hit COVID, and I said, "Oh, this is not going to happen. COVID is going to make it impossible for us to get a merger done. Merging two companies is tough enough. Merging three companies is really tough. But believe it or not, we got the three companies merged by early May of last year, and maybe lost a week in the process. So regulators went forward and companies went forward. I guess the most astonishing thing, beyond the fact that we were able to get this done at the outset of COVID, is we now have a company that's merged, a product of a merger of three companies, and none of the employees have met face to face.
Yeah. This is a common refrain in a number of businesses that I'm involved in, including some startups where we have actually never met. So I know whereof you speak there. So just sort of take us through what's the value proposition or the new goal as a result of this merged company?
Well, I have been in the media world for a long time. You mentioned CNBC. I founded CNBC and MSNBC, and was able to understand at the time what needed to happen to the news business to add new dimensions like that. I went on to become CEO of TiVo, and where we pioneered on-demand entertainment television shows at your fingertips, and then went on to be the ones that took Netflix and Amazon out of the computer to the television screen and started the whole streaming of entertainment program phenomena. The sports world is the one that I have now turned to. And for those in the media industry or viewers of sports television, a couple things have become pretty clear. And one is the phenomenon of cord cutting, where people are disconnecting from cable and satellite. And the sports channels get paid across all homes when they're cable or satellite channels, even the many homes that never watch sports programming. And what happens then is when people disconnect the bundle, cord cut, they are no longer part of the equation in terms of how sports programming is supported. And that has been compounded by the fact that sports programming went away for the first parts of COVID, as everybody knows. When it came back, ratings did not come back. And ratings for most sports programming was down. So you had this double impact of the whole business model of sports beginning to deteriorate. And we saw this happening. Much of it was accelerated by COVID. And we said, we are going to be a company that helps support with new revenue streams how sports is conducted. But there's a big caveat there, and that is, to younger demographics, eSports, competitive play among video games, is taking much more time than traditional sports is. And so to talk about sports comprehensively, you also have to be making a contribution to the eSports business model. So that's what we consciously set out to do in a number of different ways, all of which we think come together as eSports becomes more popular. Traditional ways of watching sports on television continue to change, and
Hold
what
that
sports
thought.
needs to do that.
Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Tom Rogers. He is the executive chairman of Engine Media Holdings. Tom, several strands I want to pull on here from your last comments. Firstly, tell us a little bit about your strategy. You mentioned Gen Z or millennials. They don't watch sports the way that you or I watch sports. So tell us a little bit more about your strategy to crack that market.
Well, a couple things which we think are really important here. Sports no longer exists on its own. A lot of younger viewers, if they aren't turning to esports, watch sports through watching highlight clips, or they are watching the social media feeds of key athletes. We've seen there's been less fandom aimed at the actual teams, and more fan enthusiasm and time spent watching individual athletes. And all of that combines with an environment where people watch with a mobile phone in their hands today. They are much more oriented toward a social experience than a passive viewing experience. And so where sports and mobile and social and gaming come together is really the intersection that we spent a lot of time thinking about. And that's where a lot of our enhancements to the revenue model for sports or esports come in.
So I do want to get to the revenue model. What does the revenue stream look like for your endeavor?
Well, we have a data company that actually measures esports performance, competition, usership on the major esports channels. We have a game publishing unit that actually makes games. We have a programmatic advertising, that's a fancy word for the new forms of digital advertising that get sold based on matching users and data on the fly in digital environments. We have a competitive gaming platform called Ultimate Multi-Party Gaming, where buddies can play each other for money in esports, or influencers play, or we host teams, tournaments for the major game publishers. And we have a business called WinView, which is a way to arm viewers of both traditional sports on television and esports on the gaming platforms, and allow them to have a game as viewers as they're watching. Think of fathers and sons have always watched sports together. Buddies watch together. They're talking back and forth, often trash talking about what the quarterback's going to do, what's going to happen next. And what we've created is a tangible platform through the mobile phone, through a mobile app, for people to play along in real time, where you're asked what's going to happen next, what's the next play going to be, what's the quarterback going to do, and you are awarded points, or points are taken away, sync to the live action in the game, and you can play for money. Entry fees, not gambling. It's not you can't bet on a single proposition or bet on the outcome of the game, but more Jeopardy style of what we call games of skill, where people are playing based on how good their sports IQ is. And with that, we think we've created an enhanced viewing experience. It's more social, that's more involved, that intuitively takes where people were watching sports anyway and brings it into a more modernized version with its own revenue stream of entry fees based on people being able to play for money. Now, we've applied that to esports as well by, if older generations don't realize this, but there's some 400 million viewers of esports around the globe.
Right.
people watching gamers play, gamers watching other gamers play on platforms known as Twitch or Facebook gaming or YouTube gaming. And they, as viewers of those gaming experiences, they are tweeting away or texting away, but they don't have a game themselves as gamers to play, predicting what's going on in the games they're watching. Again, having entry fees, direct to consumer revenue streams that allow them to compete about who knows the game better, about what's going to happen, can also be applied to esports.
It's a fascinating and very fast-changing world. We're going to continue with our discussion with Tom Rogers of Engine Media Holdings. We're going to take a little break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Tom Rogers. We're talking about esports and gaming. Tom, you mentioned, I think, in passing, celebrities and influencers. Is that part of your model as well, to get more celebrities and influencers involved, to bring in people who are influenced by them?
Absolutely. And in the esports arenas, influencers play a critical role, not only in terms of viewership and people wanting to watch their favorite esports personality, but they have a lot to do with marketing in those environments. Our data business, in fact, has a great deal to do with the esports arena by measuring what influencers are hot in what games, and sharing data like that with brands and sponsors who now are realizing that younger generations don't watch traditional TV, linear television anymore. And if they're going to find them, the gaming platforms are a phenomenal place to market. But the data available to market in that space has not been great. We think we're making a real contribution to enhancing the esports revenue model by the kind of granular data that we have, in part telling you what influencers are the right ones to get behind.
And would you say that in terms of how these influencers are involved in it as well, do they become your business partners in a sense?
Well, they can be. They can be affiliates in a sense that help market offerings. We can help them by talking about metrics that brands and sponsors care about. So there's relationships that can work both ways there for sure. There's a really important element that influencers play, not only in the streaming gaming world, but in social media generally. And one of the key things that we'll be doing is tying an influencer's role in general social media, say Instagram, to gaming platforms, so that you'll be able to have a comprehensive view of how much does a social media presence in both streaming and more traditional social media platforms provide to sponsors, advertisers, media partners.
Makes sense. So let me come back to Canada. What does the Canadian market look like? Obviously, it's a sub-market. How does Canada compare in terms of take-up and so on with the U.S. or other countries?
Canada is a market with a great deal of sports interest, as well as a great deal of esports interest. The key esports company that was part of this merger was a native Canadian company traded on the Toronto Exchange. I would say that the underlying interest in esports in Canada is large. Interestingly, from an investor point of view, there seem to be more funds with greater interest in the growth of this space in the United States than in Canada. But that's more of an investor issue, not a consumer issue.
And what about demographics? Are you trying to make sure that your offering is diverse for many different sort of segments of the population?
Very much so. And we have a particular focus on thinking through women in gaming, which has often been um, um, a more troubled area in some ways in terms of bullying, women not feeling as comfortable in some of these platforms. And so, among the things we'd like to do is figure out a way to have environments for women who want to pursue esports or gaming and sports viewing, and find ways that are particularly responsive to that particular segment of the population.
And would you say that you are being able to look at all sort of age segments? I'm thinking about Gen Z versus millennials, that kind of thing.
Yes, there are certainly games that apply to different age segments versus others. We don't focus on the particularly young side of the market. There are other companies that do. We are more focused on uh, older teens, young adults, and particularly the entry fee gaming element, far more reasonable, rational, and responsive when you're dealing with the older segment of that audience.
We're going to continue our conversation with Tom Rogers. Stay with us. There's more to discuss. And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Tom Rogers. He's the executive chairman of Engine Media Holdings. Tom, I just wanted to get your sense, since obviously you're trading on the Toronto Exchange, what your sense of Canadian capital markets are. Is it tough to raise money? Was it? Did you have an easy time of it? Take us through that a little bit.
Well, we have not done a broad-based public offering in the Canadian market, so I can't give you a broad perspective there. We did find a number of Canadian investors who were very interested in what's going on in gaming. I can say that when you look at, say, NASDAQ and peer companies, the multiples that are being ascribed to peer companies in the American markets is far more buoyant, meaning much bigger multiples than we're seeing here in Toronto. But it is a market that has a great deal of understanding how younger companies that are public can be supported, and a lot of people with experience in what I'll call small cap public companies, and understanding their potential growth trajectories. And that's a very useful overall element, I think, within the financial ecosystem, to have a public market with the kind of smart regulation that exists within Canada as a fostering environment for young companies that may ultimately find their way to other markets where more aggressive investors are involved. But certainly the Toronto market has served us well.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things we're always trying to wrestle with: how to grow companies here in Canada, how to retain them here, not lose the advantage of these brilliant minds that are part of the ecosystem here. Maybe this is an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is there something that you can say about what governments should be doing or should not be doing in Canada that could make the life of a startup or a company like yours, of your particular size, easier and better to stay here?
No, I don't. I don't really think in the areas that we exist in that I point to anything. You know, I think generally regulators have to come to terms with the cyber currency issues generally, and the extent to which cyber currency becomes a factor in all markets, not just in the value of Bitcoin or cyber currencies, but how it is used as a way of trading on other securities. But that's something that all markets and all countries are
So
going to have to
are you
grapple
saying,
with.
yeah, are you saying that it's a good thing to have crypto trading, or it's a challenging thing to have crypto trading?
I'm saying it's something that deserves regulatory attention, and I don't I don't have a thought out viewpoint on it yet, but I
Yeah.
know it's something that deserves more regulatory focus.
It's kind of like the Wild West a little bit out there right now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, I know for sure. We've got about 30 seconds left. Are you optimistic that you've found the right secret sauce for your company then? Things are looking good?
Yeah, we're feeling very good about being a diversified company that isn't betting on a particular game or a particular team. We are agnostic in the space in that we'll grow with the overall sector. The data business grows with the sector. A way for people to compete while they play grows with the sector. A way for viewers to participate, traditional sports or esports, grows with gaming generally. Programmatic advertising is a new way of making sure that advertising finds its way into these new services also. So I think the problem that some investors have had in esports betting on a particular team, particular league, a particular game is it can be flash in the pan
Right.
stuff that's hot 1 minute, isn't the next.
Sure.
We've really tried to put ourselves together in a way that we grow with the entire sector.
Tom Rogers, that is it for now. Want to thank you for being a guest on our program, and I wish you every success with your company.
Thanks very much for having me.
For sure. Obviously, a fast growing area, lots happening simultaneously, and we'll be continuing to cover this because it's changing the way we look at and consider sports. So stay with us.